There's a lot of great Neapolitan-style pizza places everywhere in North America, but the hardest kind of pizza to find is a good New York-style pizza. The kind that has a thin, crispy crust, quality mozzarella, and a fresh tomato sauce. For this video, I'm doing some experimenting to see if I can get quality New York-style pizza in a home oven. Let's see how the results turn out. For our pizza dough, we're going to start by making a Poolish. The thing about a Poolish is that we're going to need to make it the day before, and the benefit of it is that we're going to hopefully develop a lot of flavor, and it's going to give the dough for the pizza a lot more rise and crispiness. So the first thing we're going to do is grab about 50 grams of dark rye flour, about 300 grams of white bread flour, 350 grams of water, and about 2.5 to 5 grams of yeast. So that's about 1 teaspoon or so. So once I combine my dry ingredients, I'm going to get out a scale and I'm going to weigh out 350 grams of water. I'm going to add that to the flour mixture. You're going to notice that this is actually quite wet, and as I'm stirring it, I can kind of see that it's actually starting to form a bit of a dough. So I know here that I need to add a little bit more water because this shouldn't come together as a dough ball. It should just be kind of a very soupy flour mixture. Now I'm going to wrap this in saran wrap and put it in the fridge overnight to develop. For our pizza dough, we're going to need 750 grams of white bread flour, 350 grams of water, 10 grams of fresh yeast. I'm using dried for this, but fresh works good too. And we're going to need about 15 grams of salt, and we're going to use half of the Poolish that we made from the day before. The other half you can use for another bread recipe. That video will probably be coming soon. Now I'm going to add the salt to the flour and Poolish and mix that together well. I just want to break up and incorporate as much of the Poolish as I can before I add the water. I'm going to scrape out the last little bits of yeast that are in here too. Now I find it much easier to actually work with this in the bowl before I turn it out on the surface. Now you'll see this dough is quite shaggy, and it really does need a little bit of kneading, but not really too much. It shouldn't take you too long, maybe 5 to 10 minutes of kneading. And you can see what I do is I just kind of turn it about 1/4 of a turn and keep folding it on itself. And in about 5 to 10 minutes, this is what I had. Now I'm just going to pop it back in the bowl while we make the tomato sauce. And that'll be just the right amount of time for this to rise a little bit more, and then it will be much easier to work with. Now for the tomato sauce, we're going to make something pretty simple, and it's going to be, I think, a pretty fresh sauce by comparison. Instead of just using a jar of tomato sauce or canned tomatoes or something like that, I'm going to cook some fresh tomatoes, and then I'm going to add a jar of strained San Marzano tomatoes. So I'm going to take the middle pith out of 3 tomatoes, and I'm just going to roughly chop them up. Just make sure that they're small enough sizes so that they don't leave big chunks on the pizza. And I'm gonna fill a saucepan to about medium to medium high heat. It's gonna be pretty hot, and you'll see the tomatoes definitely get cooked pretty quickly. So I'm just gonna make sure to add the tomatoes, add the garlic, stir everything really well. And then before this burns or sticks to the pan, I'm gonna add a little bit of oregano, a little bit of kosher salt, and then I'm going to add my jar of San Marzano tomatoes. Now all you need to do is incorporate the ingredients together and take it off the heat and just let it sit there to cool for a little bit. Now for the cheese, if you can find pizza mozzarella or full fat mozzarella, that's what you should probably go for, but really any mozzarella should work for this. Now that the dough's been rising for about half an hour, you can see just how much the Poolish and the yeast will make this rise. And without knocking out too much of the air bubbles, I'm going to fold and stretch this on itself a few times until it forms a nice tight dough ball. And you can see when I cut the dough here, there's plenty of air bubbles. Should give a really good rise and some nice crispiness for the pizza when we take it out of the oven. Now I'm going to take each half and then turn each half into quarters. And I specifically made some of the balls. You can see 2 of them are smaller and 2 of them are bigger. The 2 smaller ones I used for the pizza, just because I have a smaller baking stone, and the 2 larger ones I used to make kind of a baguette after. Now I'm going to dust the surface with a little bit of flour, and I'm going to gently pat out one portion of the pizza dough. And then I'm going to use gravity to slowly stretch it out, and then my hands, I'm going to use the back of my knuckles to stretch it out as much as I can. And I'm going to flour this sheet well. I found that it was sticking in some of my test recipes, so I made sure to put a little extra flour on there. And you can see I was able to get about 12 to 14 inch pizza. Now I'm just going to put a little bit of sauce. I think for a good New York style pizza, there shouldn't be a ton of sauce on there anyway, and especially for a home oven. A home oven's just not going to get hot enough to really get a crispy crust on the pizza. So you're going to make sure that the pizza doesn't stick by giving it a little shake. And then you're going to slide it onto your baking stone in the oven. Now I'm going to just dust on a little bit of Parmesan cheese, and the heat from the pizza will melt the Parmesan cheese perfectly onto it. And you can see we were able to get a pretty decent crust. There was no flop on this pizza, and there was definitely a little bit of crispiness. It could have been crispier, but I didn't want to set off any smoke alarms in the building, so I just kind of had to work with what I had. But the end result was great. It really tasted like a New York style pizza. If I was able to get the oven a little bit hotter, I think it would have been perfect.